People usually assume there was one dramatic explosion that broke our family apart, but the truth is colder. My parents spent my surgery funds on a Christmas car. For my sister, calling it an investment, then dumped me at my aunt's door saying, "He's a burden. Keep him." Years later, I walked back into their house, with legal documents ending their control forever. But the real fracture started much earlier, in silence. It began with the slow, creeping realization that I wasn't their child. I was just a malfunctioning unit they didn't know how to return. My low blood pressure episodes started when I was around 6. Doctors called it unpredictable. My father, Weston, called it dramatic. While my vision fuzzed and my legs turned hollow, he was busy timing my sister Riley's sprints. She was the golden investment, all speed and potential, while I was the depreciating asset requiring maintenance. If I stumbled in the hallway, my mother, Victoria, wouldn't rush over to catch me. She would simply sigh, adjusting a vase, annoyed that my collapse had scuffed her polished floorboards. I was 13 when the silence turned dangerous. On the morning of Riley's district showcase, I woke up with the room tilting to the left. My pulse weak and erratic, I stumbled into the kitchen, gripping the granite counter to stay upright. "I don't feel good," I whispered. Weston didn't even look up from his coffee. "Don't start, Mason. Today is important for your sister." They grabbed their keys and walked out, leaving me alone with a spinning ceiling and a strict order to lock the front door. 10 minutes after they left, my legs gave out. I hit the hardwood, the impact jarring my teeth, but the pain felt distant. I dragged my phone from my pocket, fingers numb and clumsy. I called Victoria. Voicemail, I texted Weston. No reply. The darkness closed in from the corners of my vision like a shutter lens. Panic finally pierced the fog. I dialed emergency services, my voice sounding thin and foreign, as I told the operator I was fainting, and there was nobody there to catch me. I woke up to the rhythmic beep of a monitor and the smell of antiseptic. A nurse adjusted my IV drip, her face softening when she saw my eyes open. She told me I was dehydrated and malnourished, her tone gentle, but her eyes searching. "We called your parents hours ago," she said, checking her clipboard. "They said they're still at a tournament." The shame burned hotter than fever. A stranger was worrying about my blood sugar, while my father was worrying about a scoreboard. They didn't show up until the next morning. Weston walked in looking irritated, checking his watch, while Victoria smoothed her skirt. "You really caused a scene," Weston muttered, tossing a bag of clothes onto the bed. The neighbors saw the ambulance. "Mrs. Grant is asking questions." There was no hug. As the nurse tried to intervene, Victoria cut her off with a sharp smile. "He just overreacts," she lied effortlessly. "We handle it." I realized then that I wasn't a son, I was a liability. The drive to Aunt Adeline's felt less like a family visit and more like a disposal run. Weston gripped the steering wheel, muttering about schedules and missed practices. When we pulled into the gravel driveway, he didn't even turn off the engine. "Just for a few weeks," he said, staring straight ahead. "Until you are stable enough not to disrupt the house." I unbuckled my seatbelt, feeling the heavy silence. He didn't look at me once as I climbed out. Adeline's house smelled of roasted garlic and old books, a sharp contrast to the antiseptic bleach of my parents' foyer. She didn't ask why I was there. She just pointed to a plate of hot food. "Eat," she said gently. "You look like a ghost." At home, food was a negotiation based on caloric utility. Here, it was just dinner. I ate until my stomach hurt, waiting for the criticism to start, but the only sound was the clock ticking. Few weeks stretched into a month. My fainting spells didn't stop, but without the constant cortisol spike of walking on eggshells, they became manageable. I learned the rhythm of this house. Uncle Jonathan didn't yell when he was stressed. He just retreated to his study. Adeline didn't perform for neighbors. She actually lived in her living room. I stopped bracing for impact every time a door opened. My shoulders, perpetually hiked up to my ears, began to drop. The fear receded. One rainy Tuesday, Jonathan found me staring blankly at the rain. He didn't tell me to be productive. Instead, he placed a wooden box on the coffee table. "Logic puzzles," he said, opening the lid to reveal intricate metal shapes. "Good for the brain. Focuses the chaos." He sat down, not as an authority figure, but as a player. He showed me how to look for patterns rather than forcing a solution. For the first time, I felt seen, not managed. I became obsessed. The puzzles had rules. If you applied the right pressure at the right angle, the metal yielded. It was fair, unlike Weston's moods or Victoria's silence. I spent hours at the small desk Jonathan bought for me, dissecting problems and reassembling them. My mind, usually a fog of medical anxiety, sharpened into a blade. I wasn't just passing time. I was learning that systems could be mastered. If I could understand the inputs, I could control the outputs. The illusion of a temporary stay shattered on a Saturday afternoon. Weston's car pulled up, but he didn't get out. He popped the trunk. I watched from the window as he unloaded my suitcases, my entire wardrobe, and set them on the wet porch. He texted Adeline one sentence. "He does better there anyway." Then he got back in the driver's seat. He didn't look at the house. He checked his mirror, merged onto the road, and drove away without braking. Adeline opened the front door and stared at the luggage, her hand covering her mouth. She didn't chase him. She didn't call to scream. She just looked at me, and I saw the realization hit her. I wasn't being lent out. I was being discarded so they could focus on their investment. "Well," she whispered, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Let's get your things inside." The silence in Adeline's house wasn't empty. It was peaceful. The growth spurt at 17 destabilized my condition. The specialist was blunt, tapping the monitor with a pen. "It's an electrical fault," he explained. "We ablate the pathway, or he keeps dropping." It was a standard procedure. Low risk but high cost. Adeline, on a teacher's salary, couldn't cover the specialist fees without insurance approval. She called Weston from the hospital hallway. I watched her posture collapse through the glass. The conversation wasn't about my health or safety. She hung up, her knuckles white against the phone case. "It's a bad time," she whispered, unable to look me in the eye. "They said Christmas expenses are significant this year." I felt a cold knot tighten in my chest. It wasn't shock, it was confirmation. Weston had just renovated their patio. Victoria was posting about designer galas. My heart wasn't a crisis to them. It was just an unexpected line item in the budget they decided to cut. A week later, the group text arrived. Come over for Christmas Eve. Big surprise for Riley. Weston didn't mention the denied funds. He just wanted an audience for his performance. Jonathan offered to decline, but I shook my head. I want to see, I said quietly. I needed to see exactly what was worth more than my life. We drove over on a freezing night. The house was lit up like a casino, flashy and desperate for attention. The driveway was dominated by a gleaming white convertible. A red bow the size of a toddler sat on the hood. Riley stood next to it, shivering in a dress that was too thin, forcing a smile for Victoria's camera. An investment. Weston boomed, clapping a hand on the roof like a salesman. For our star athlete. Image is everything. The price tag was still on the window. It was 3 times the cost of my surgery. Adeline stepped forward, her voice shaking with a fury I had never heard. You have money for this? She asked, pointing at the chrome rims. But not for your son's heart. Victoria gasped, clutching her scarf theatrically. Don't be dramatic, Adeline. It's Christmas. Weston crossed his arms, looking bored by the interruption. The car holds value. Hospital bills are a waste. Mason is fine. He looked right at me. He's standing, isn't he? Riley looked at me, her eyes wide and apologetic. She didn't look like a winner. She looked trapped against the leather seats. But I didn't feel jealousy. I felt a sudden, clinical detachment wash over me. They weren't evil geniuses, they were just bad investors. They were pouring resources into a volatile asset while liquidating the stable one. The herd evaporated, replaced by cold analysis. I wasn't their son. I was a failed business venture. We're leaving, Adeline said, grabbing my arm. I am filing for adoption. You won't stop me. Weston shrugged, turning back to the car to polish a smudge. Less paperwork for me, he muttered. He didn't even say goodbye. As we walked back to Adeline's battered sedan, the snow began to fall, covering their driveway in white. I didn't look back. He stopped seeing them as parents and started seeing them as faulty code that needed to be deleted. The adoption hearing was quiet, a stark contrast to the noise of my childhood. No drama. Just signatures on heavy bond paper and the judge's rare, warm smile. A month later, the surgery corrected the electrical fault in my heart. Waking up felt different this time. The constant background noise of dizziness was gone. I took a deep breath, and it didn't stutter. Adeline held my hand, tears silent on her cheeks. I wasn't a broken thing anymore. I was a system that had finally been patched. Recovery meant weeks of stillness, so I spent them devouring code. Python became my second language because it didn't lie. If a script failed, it gave you an error log, not a passive, aggressive sigh. I loved the binary nature of it, true or false, run or terminate. I built scripts to organize Adeline's budget and Jonathan's design files. It was small, but it was control. I was building a world where nothing happened without a clear, defined permission. I didn't have a degree, but I had a portfolio of brutal efficiency. The hiring manager at a logistics firm looked at my automation demo, eyebrows raised. You automated the entire intake process, he asked. It was inefficient, I replied simply. He hired me on the spot. I worked in the shadows of the server room, optimizing workflows. While other 20-year-olds were partying, I was rewriting legacy code. I didn't need friends, I needed the absolute reliability of machines. My reputation grew quickly. I became the guy who could automate anything. I stripped away redundancies in the company's supply chain, like dead weight. It felt personal. Every hour saved was a correction of my history. I was proving that efficiency wasn't about discarding people. It was about removing the friction that hurt them. My bank account grew, a steady accumulation of proof. I bought my own car. I paid cash. It wasn't flashy, but it started every time. Then came the notifications. Victoria liked a LinkedIn update about my promotion to lead engineer. Weston commented on a photo of my new apartment. Always knew you had the brains. Must be the genes. I stared at the screen, the blue light reflecting in my glasses. They were rewriting history, pasting over the neglect, with a narrative of supportive parenting. They wanted the social credit of my success without the cost of the investment. I didn't block them. I archived the thread. I built a fortress of routines. My apartment was a smart home, responding to my voice and presence. Lights adjusted automatically. Coffee brewed at 6 a.m. sharp. I minimized human variables. Adeline and Jonathan visited for Sunday dinners, the only chaos I allowed. They brought warmth into my sterile sanctuary. Jonathan would marvel at my setup, joking that I lived inside a computer. He wasn't wrong. I engineered a life where I could never be blindsided by lack of resources. At 24, I felt invincible. My heart beat in a steady, medically corrected rhythm. My code ran without errors. I sat in my ergonomic chair, watching the city lights through soundproof glass, believing I had successfully formatted the past. I thought I had accounted for every variable, every possible point of failure. I was wrong. The intercom buzzed at midnight, a harsh, jagged sound tearing through the silence. The error logs of my past were archived, until a glitch knocked on my door. I checked the security feed. A figure stood huddled in the rain, shaking violently. I opened the door to find Riley. She wore a coat that cost more than my first car, but it was soaked through, heavy with icy water. Her mascara ran in dark streaks down her face, destroying the perfect image Victoria curated. She looked at me, eyes hollow, and whispered my name like it was a lifeline. I didn't know where else to go. She choked out. I pulled her inside and locked the door, engaging the deadbolt with a heavy click. The sound made her flinch. I guided her to the couch, handing her a towel. She held it like a shield. She wasn't the arrogant teenager I remembered. She was trembling, stripped of her bravado. "They think I am at the gym," she said, staring at the floor. "If they find out I left, Dad will cancel my cards." The fear in her voice was primal. I handed her a mug of hot water, my engineer brain already scanning for variables. "Tell me exactly what happened," I said, keeping my voice neutral. She took a shaky breath. "My knee gave out 3 weeks ago. The doctor said I need rest. Maybe surgery." She gripped the mug until her knuckles turned white. "Dad said no. He said scouts are watching. He said pain is just weakness leaving the body. He forced me to run anyway." The cruelty was efficient, almost industrial. I tried to refuse. Riley whispered, tears dripping into the water. He told me if I quit, he takes the car back. He takes the tuition. He cuts me off completely. She looked up, desperate. He said the car was an investment, Mason. Just like he said about me. If the asset doesn't perform, he liquidates it. Hearing my own internal analysis coming from her mouth felt like a physical blow. And Mom? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Riley laughed, a brittle, broken sound. She cried. She said I was selfish. She asked how I could humiliate the family after everything they sacrificed. Riley wiped her face aggressively, smearing the makeup further. She told me I was ruining her image. She didn't ask about my knee once. It was the same script they used on me, just recited to a different actor on a brighter stage. I sat back, the anger simmering cold and hard in my chest. I had assumed she was the winner in their game. I was wrong. I used to be jealous of you, she admitted softly, refusing to meet my eyes. When they kicked you out, I thought you were lucky. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. You got to leave, Mason. You got to be a person. I just became a trophy they polish when people are looking. She wasn't the golden child anymore. She was a hostage. The logic of my isolation crumbled. I couldn't just automate my own safety and ignore the system failing right in front of me. You aren't going back, I stated, my voice flat and final. Riley looked at me, terrified. They'll come for me. They have the spare keys. I glanced at my security monitor. Logic dictated I stay away, but morality dictated I debug the system. The dining table at Adeline's house transformed into a command center by sunrise. I pushed aside the placemats and laid out 3 laptops, a printer, and a stack of legal pads. Riley sat opposite me, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, holding a mug of coffee she hadn't touched in an hour. She looked like a refugee in her own life, watching me construct a fortress out of paper and statutes. I didn't offer empty platitudes about things getting better. I simply opened a fresh document and started typing. We need to audit their leverage, I said, treating her trauma like a complex debugging session. What exactly do they hold over you? Riley flinched at the directness but answered. The tuition. The apartment lease. The car. She stared at the table, her voice trembling. Dad says I owe him for 18 years of overhead. He has a spreadsheet, Mason. He actually tracks the ROI on my training camps. It was grotesque, but predictable. He treated his children like stocks. He hated losing his principal investment. I focused on the car first, the gleaming white symbol of my replacement. Where is the registration? I asked, pulling up the state's property laws on my second screen. Riley dug a crumpled envelope out of her coat pocket. In the glove box. He made me keep it there in case I got pulled over. I smoothed out the document. There, printed in black ink, was the owner's name, Riley Vance. Weston, in his arrogance, had put it in her name to save on insurance premiums. This is the kill switch, I said, tapping the paper. Riley looked confused, but he paid for it. He has the receipt. I shook my head, feeling the cold satisfaction of logic clicking into place. It doesn't matter who wrote the check. The state recognizes the name on the title. If he tries to take the keys, it isn't repossession. It's grand theft auto. Riley blinked, the realization slowly dawning on her. For the first time all morning, Her breathing slowed. Next came the medical neglect. "I need your texts," I told her. "Everything regarding your knee." She hesitated, ashamed, but unlocked her phone. I scrolled through months of coercion. Messages from Weston demanding she skip physical therapy. Messages from Victoria claiming the limp was psychosomatic and embarrassing. I took screenshots of everything, uploading them to a secure cloud server. We weren't just building a defense, we were compiling a weapon. This was evidence of endangerment, documented proof that their care was actually abuse. Adeline walked in then, carrying a box of files from the basement. "I kept everything too," she said, placing the box on the table. "Emails from your teachers. The hospital records from when they left you. Mason." She looked at Riley with fierce protectiveness. "If they want to talk about reputation, we can show the neighborhood exactly who they are." It was a critical addition. We weren't just fighting for Riley's future. We were finally litigating the past. The timeline of cruelty was complete. I drafted the cease and desist letter next, the keys clacking loudly in the quiet room. I used precise, unemotional language, citing the specific statutes regarding harassment and property interference. Any attempt to contact Riley Vance or restrict her movement will be met with immediate legal action. It wasn't a request. It was a boundary made of concrete. Riley watched the words appear on the screen, mesmerizing and terrifying. "They'll explode," she whispered. "Dad will lose his mind if he reads this. He won't just read it," I corrected, hitting print. The machine whirred to life, spitting out the pages. "We're going to hand deliver it." Riley stiffened, fear flashing in her eyes. "I can't go back there, Mason. I can't." I leaned forward, catching her gaze. "If we mail it, they can ignore it. They can spin the story. If we do this in public, where their precious audience is watching, they lose their power." It was a calculated risk, but essential. The Christmas party. Adeline realized, her hand flying to her chest. "They're hosting the entire neighborhood tonight." It was the perfect stage. Weston and Victoria lived for that party. For the illusion of the perfect, affluent family celebrating in their perfect home. Disrupting it wouldn't just be inconvenient. It would be a nuclear strike on their social standing. "It's the only way," I said. "We don't go to argue. We go to terminate the contract." Riley took a breath and nodded. By noon, the war room was silent again. The laptops were closed. The documents were organized into a crisp, black folder, clamped shut with a heavy binder clip. It looked innocuous, just a sheaf of papers. But it held enough voltage to fry their entire narrative. I put on my coat, checking my reflection in the hall mirror. The boy who had fainted from neglect was gone. In his place stood the architect of their downfall. "Ready?" I asked. Riley stood up, shaky but standing. "Ready." The house looked like a department store display window, aggressive in its cheer. 12-foot inflatables choked the lawn, and laser lights scrambled across the brick facade in frantic, dizzying patterns. It wasn't a home. It was a desperate plea for relevance screaming into the suburban night. I parked my modest sedan behind a line of leased, luxury SUVs. The engine idling for a moment before I cut the power. Riley sat beside me, gripping the door handle until her knuckles turned white. "Showtime," I whispered. She didn't smile, but she unlocked the door. We walked up the driveway, the snow crunching loudly under our boots. Inside, I could see silhouettes moving against the amber glow of the chandelier. Weston's curated audience, sipping eggnog and admiring the crown molding. Riley slowed down near the porch steps, her breath hitching in visible puffs of steam. "I feel sick," she murmured, pulling her coat tighter against the wind. "Stick to the script," I reminded her, touching the black folder tucked under my arm. It felt heavy, like a loaded weapon. I didn't knock. I opened the door. The noise hit us first. Jazz music and forced laughter. Weston stood in the foyer, holding a Scotch glass, holding court with the neighbors. He froze when he saw us, his eyes darting to Riley's disheveled hair, then to me. He recovered instantly, slapping on a plastic grin. "Christopher, the prodigal engineer returns?" he boomed, stepping forward to clap my shoulder. "And Riley, you are late." His voice dropped an octave on the last word, sharp and venomous. He was trying to direct the scene, but I wasn't following his blocking. Victoria materialized from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a festive apron. Her eyes narrowed at Riley's jeans, scanning the room to see who noticed the lack of formal wear. "Go change, Riley," she hissed through a bright, fake smile. "The Grants are asking about your knee. Tell them it's fine." Riley didn't move toward the stairs. She planted her feet, looking smaller than usual but immovable. "I am not changing," she said, her voice shaking but audible over the music. "I am leaving. For good." The jazz music seemed to stop. Weston's smile vanished, replaced by the ugly, red flush of lost control. He took a step toward her, ignoring the guests who had gone quiet behind him. "You don't decide when you are done," he snarled, forgetting the audience entirely. "We have 18 years of capital in you. You don't walk away from an investment just because you are tired." He pointed a finger in her face. "You leave this house, you leave with nothing. I'll strip that car, cancel your tuition, and leave you on the street." It was the threat he always used. I stepped between them, blocking his line of sight to Riley. "Actually, Weston, you won't touch the car." I kept my voice level, the tone of a consultant delivering bad news. "The vehicle title is in Riley's name. I checked the state database this morning." Weston scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "I paid for it. It's my property. Financing is irrelevant to ownership." I corrected. "If you attempt to keep the keys or block the driveway, I will have the police here for vehicle theft within 6 minutes." I opened the black folder and pulled out the first document. The paper crisp and white against the dark hallway. "This is a cease and desist order regarding financial harassment," I said, handing it to him. He didn't take it, so I let it drop onto the polished side table. "And this," I continued, pulling out the second stack, "is a restraining order application based on documented medical neglect and emotional coercion." The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Victoria gasped, looking around frantically at the silent neighbors. "Christopher, stop this," Victoria pleaded, grabbing my arm, her grip tight and desperate. "People are watching. Don't ruin Christmas." I pulled my arm away gently, but firmly. "You ruined it when you made Riley run on a torn ligament," I said, loud. enough for Mrs. Grant to hear in the living room. "We have the texts, Mom. The threats. The refusal to seek medical care." I gestured to the folder. "It's all printed. Every time you chose your image over her health. It's part of the public record now." The room shifted. I watched the neighbors exchange glances. Not of pity for the parents, but of judgment. The illusion of the perfect family dissolved in real time. Weston looked around, realizing he was losing the room. He tried to laugh. A hollow, barking sound. "Kids," he said to the crowd. Always dramatic, but nobody laughed back. Mrs. Grant set her drink down on a coaster with a sharp clink. The silence was absolute. Weston looked at the papers on the table, then at me, and I saw real fear. "We're done here," I said, turning my back on him. "Riley is coming with me. If you contact her..." "The next visit is from a sheriff." I opened the door, letting the cold wind rush back in to clear the stifling air. Riley walked out first. Her head high, stepping over the threshold without looking back. I paused for 1 second, meeting Weston's furious, impotent stare. "Happy holidays," I said flatly. Then I closed the door on the wreckage of their reputation and walked into the quiet, clean snow. The silence inside the car felt heavier than the screaming match we left behind. Riley sat with her knees pulled to her chest, trembling from the adrenaline crash. I watched the house fade in the rearview mirror, its aggressive holiday lights shrinking into insignificant specks of red and green. My hands gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2. Steady and sure, I expected to feel triumphant, but I just felt a profound, exhausting quiet. The code had executed successfully. The loop was finally broken. Riley let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh, burying her face in her hands. "Did you see his face?" she choked out, wiping tears that kept falling. "He looked so small." I didn't interrupt her or tell her to stop crying. I let the data flow. For years, she had been the trophy on the shelf, polished and silenced, but now the cracks were showing. "He can't touch you now," I said softly, merging onto the highway. "The firewall is up. You are safe." Winter thawed into a muddy spring, and the threats Weston screamed never materialized. The legal paperwork did its job, acting as a permanent barrier between us and their toxicity. Riley started therapy, dissecting 18 years of performative perfectionism, one session at a time. She stopped running on her bad knee and started painting. Something messy and unproductive that Weston would have hated. I watched her learn to be human rather than an asset. It was a messy process, inefficient and nonlinear, but it was finally real. We gathered at Adeline's for Easter. The table crowded with actual food instead of props. Jonathan laughed at a joke Riley made, his booming voice filling the room. For the first time, I didn't feel like an observer recording data from the sidelines. I passed the potatoes to my sister, and she smiled without checking if anyone was watching. We weren't the golden child and the burden anymore. We were just two survivors comparing notes on the wreckage we escaped. The hierarchy was deleted. I used to believe my worth was tied to my utility, that I only mattered if I was solving a problem. But sitting there, listening to Adeline hum in the kitchen, I realized the error in my logic. I didn't save Riley because I was efficient. I saved her because I loved her. My parents viewed people as transactions, inputs and outputs to be balanced. I refused to run on that operating system. I wasn't a machine. I was the architect of my own peace. I drove past the old neighborhood one last time months later, strictly out of curiosity. The for sale sign sat in the manicured lawn, a testament to their need to find a new audience. The house looked dark, empty of the children they claimed to cherish. I didn't feel anger, just a neutral acknowledgement of a closed file. I turned the car around, heading to the life I built from scratch. Control isn't about forcing others to stay. It's about having the strength to walk away.